Who are the top 10 quarterbacks returning in college football this year? We are going to take my top 10 list and count it down from 10 all the way down to 1 to see who my number 1 quarterback is going into the 2026 football season. And then stick around for the very end of the episode, for we are going to put a program spotlight on the Virginia Tech Hokies. Okay, they used to be one of the best programs in the country. Can they get back to what they were? But before we get into it, I gotta remind you guys, go down, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, or leave a comment and tell me what I can do better if you're not enjoying the show. If not, then go down and leave a comment either way. Just tell me what you enjoy about the show. Tell me your thoughts on Virginia Tech. Who are your top 10 quarterbacks going into 2026? Give me your thoughts down below. Now let's get right into the episode, okay? I hope you guys are enjoying the college basketball tournament going on. I got it on right behind me. Miami and Purdue are playing right now for a spot in the Sweet 16. My Michigan Wolverines are already in the Sweet 16, playing either Texas Tech or Alabama. We'll figure that out tonight. And Nebraska is in the Sweet 16, never won a tournament game. This is probably my favorite story of the tournament so far. Nebraska has never won a tournament game before, and they go in and they win 2 games. They're in the Sweet 16 already. I was talking with one of my friends last night that's a Nebraska fan. As you guys know, I'm from Kansas City, right? So Nebraska's only 3.5 hours away. So a lot of Nebraska fans here in Kansas City, a lot of people I grew up with are Nebraska fans. I was talking with one of them last night, and I was like, man, I am just so happy that Nebraska fans finally have something. Okay, my generation of Nebraska fans, I was born around 2007, right? So even people a little bit older than me, and definitely people that are younger than me, have never seen Nebraska win anything at all, except for volleyball. They've had volleyball. Their baseball team's been all right, hasn't been great, but for most of their lives, it's just been their dads talking about how good they used to be. And they've never gotten to experience any type of succeeding, any type of positive things happening to their athletic program. And my friends finally got it last night, all right? I feel so happy for them. They are ecstatic right now. I cannot say enough how happy I am for Nebraska fans. They totally deserve it. They've been through enough. They deserve to have a tournament win. Now let's get to football, okay? It's a college football show. I'm a little stuffy today. The allergies are kind of rough, so if I sound a little weird, I apologize. But let's get right into the top 10 quarterbacks in the 2026 season. And my number 10 quarterback is going to be Gunnar Stockton, the Georgia Bulldogs quarterback. Okay, he's been there for a couple years. He's been really good. He hasn't really quite taken that next step, but I think that he could in 2026. But we've kind of been waiting for him to take that next step to become one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and he just hasn't quite done that yet. But I think he could in 2026, okay? They did lose Zachariah Branch and Dylan Bell, 2 of their best wide receivers, both going to the draft. Both will be drafted. I question if they can replace anybody at that wide receiver position, okay? They lost some of their top guys, both going to the draft, but we know that Georgia has not been great at the wide receiver position in the past, okay? Outside of this past year, before that, they were abysmal, okay? They couldn't catch a football in 2024, and it ended up costing them in the national quarterfinal against Notre Dame, okay? They have to be able to replace the wide receivers if they want Gunnar Stockton to succeed. But on the positive side of it, okay, he's been incredibly reliable. He's been probably the most reliable quarterback in the country. You know exactly what you're going to get from him every single time he's on the field. Super consistent, never going to make a dumb play. Probably won't make an amazing play, but he's never going to make the dumb play. He'll make the right play almost every single time. It feels like he's been around forever because he did play in 2024. He played in that 2024 SEC championship game where they ended up coming back and beating the Texas Longhorns, and then he did play in that playoff game against Notre Dame. So it feels like he's been around for a lot longer than he actually has. Again, last year I believe was his first year starting, and he has a lot to build off of, okay? He had 2,894 yards with 24 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. So that speaks to what I was saying, where he's not going to make the dumb play. He's not going to make a play that he shouldn't make. He'll always make the right play. I just don't see him as one of those players that's going to go above and beyond and really make an insane play and really turn the tables. I think you need to make an offense around him, and that's why the wide receiver group is going to be so important for Gunnar Stockton in 2026. Now, my number 9 quarterback in the 2026 season is going to be Jayden Maiava, the quarterback there at USC. He's going into his second year starting. Okay, he has a lot of experience already. Last year, they went 9-3. was not a bad year for USC at all. There's a lot to build off of there. The defense got a lot better. I think that's going to really impact Jayden Maiava because I think they can play more complementary, okay? It doesn't necessarily impact him on down-to-down plays, but it's going to allow him to go get a rest. They won't be out there forever, right? It's not going to be only their offense out there because their defense can't make a stop. Hopefully, the defense can do a lot better of a job and allow that offense to rest and really replenish and do a good job. And then, of course, they really improved their running game last year, okay? Their running game was probably the most important aspect to USC's success last year. They ran the ball really well last year. That really helped Jayden Maiava not have so much pressure on him, and I think that's why he performed so well. He had 3,711 yards, so a ton of production there. 24 touchdowns, could improve a little bit, and 10 interceptions could certainly get a little bit better, okay? He could stop turning over the football. He needs to be able to just make the plays in front of him. He fits into the system that Lincoln Riley runs perfectly, and we all know that Lincoln Riley is one of the best quarterback developers in the country, if not the best quarterback developer in the country. So if he can continue to develop and get better in that system and fit better into that system, play within the system, then Jayden Maiava is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country next year. Okay, they do have to replace Malachi Lemon. He was one of the best wide receivers in the country last year. I don't think you're going to be able to replace a guy like that. You're going to be able to replace him in the aggregate. If they can do that, then Jayden Maiava is primed for another really big season. If not, then you're going to see him fall back just a little bit. I do like Jayden Maiava, though, because unlike Caleb Williams whenever he was at USC, Caleb Williams liked to go outside of the system. He made a lot of plays that he wasn't supposed to make, right? Which isn't a bad thing. He carried them to about 11 wins, I think, that one year. But Jayden Maiava can fit into the system and do exactly what Lincoln Riley wants him to do a lot better than Caleb Williams does, okay? And that's nothing against Caleb Williams. Obviously, you see him with the Bears now. He's off making the playoffs, winning playoff games. He's doing a great job, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. But Jayden Maiava, for a college quarterback, is going to be able to fit Lincoln Riley's system to a T, and I think he's going to do a lot better of a job than Caleb Williams did in the sense of just fitting within the system, making the plays that he's supposed to make, not doing too much, not forcing the football anywhere. Jayden Maiava is going to do a really good job in his second year starting under Lincoln Riley. Now moving on to number 8, Brennan Sorsby, the Cincinnati transfer going to Texas Tech. Okay, he is one of the better quarterbacks in the country just because he was super productive at Cincinnati. One of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 last year. He had 2,800 yards right on the dot. 2,800 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. The interceptions could come down just a tad, but nothing too wild, okay? There was times, at the end of games, maybe he has to make a play that he doesn't have to make normally. Then he throws an interception, that goes against him, right? So completely understandable in the 7 interceptions range. There's going to be a lot more talent there at Texas Tech, okay? They're spending big money for big reasons. They want to go win a national championship. That is their goal. I don't know if it's ever going to happen. I don't know if it's ever going to happen soon, but their goal is to win a national championship, and they are spending money like that is their goal. So there's going to be a lot more talent around them. The offensive line is going to be improved. The wide receiver group is going to be improved. Can Micah Hudson improve? He is one of the most talented wide receivers that we've seen coming out of high school, and he just hasn't hit his stride yet. Okay, he was at Texas Tech. I think he was at Texas A&M. Maybe he came back. I'm not really sure exactly what happened there. But Micah Hudson was a 5-star talent out of high school, commits to Texas Tech. He is an insane talent. He was absolutely crazy coming out of high school. Can he produce that at the college level? I don't know if he can. We haven't seen it yet. He didn't play a lot last year. I think there's a very high ceiling for Micah Hudson next year, though. If he can improve, if he can be even half of what his potential was, that offense is going to get a lot better, and it's going to be a lot better for Brennan Sorsby. There's also just a lot of momentum in the program, right? Like I talked about, they are spending money like a big-time college football program, and it's really showing on the field. Winning the Big 12, going to the college football playoffs. They were in the game with Oregon for quite a while. Just the offense was abysmal, but you bring in a guy like Brennan Sorsby, and that kind of thing changes pretty fast. So hopefully Brennan Sorsby can get that offense turned around and they can compete in the college football playoff for 2026. Now my number 7 quarterback, it's going to be a hot name, okay? I don't know if you guys are expecting this to be a little bit higher, but Arch Manning is my number 7 quarterback in the country. Look, I just didn't see enough last year at the beginning of the year to really be confident in what Arch Manning is doing, okay? I don't want to go through this whole hype thing that we did last year, like Arch Manning's going to be the greatest quarterback of all time. He's a Manning. He's going to be awesome. And then he completely falls on his face week 1, struggles up until the last few weeks of the college football regular season, and then he finally gets it turned around, right? He did really, really well at the end of the season. He got a lot better, which is why he did make the list at number 7, right? I just don't have enough proof from last season to be able to say he's going to be a top 5 quarterback. I don't want to be one of those people that overhypes him and expects way too much of him, and then he falls flat on his face again. Mostly because I don't know if the offensive line really got all that better. They got Melvin Siani there from Wake Forest, a really good offensive lineman, but they didn't get anybody else. Everybody else is just returning from last year, and maybe they believe in their guys, but I know they missed out on Andrew Sproul. I know they missed out on Jordan Seaton, so I know that they didn't get the offensive tackles that they wanted, right? I don't see a way that offensive line improves astronomically. I don't think I see it improving to the point where they can win a national championship next year. Of course they could, right? Maybe they hit on everything, but I don't see that happening, right? I don't see that being the most likely scenario. So I don't trust that offensive line to be able to put Arch Manning in the most successful position. Of course, Arch Manning did have a good year last year. He had 3,163 yards, 26 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. So he has done a really good job, right? He has done a really good job at the end of the season. He got a lot better. And then, if you want some hope, Cam Coleman is being paired with Ryan Wingo next year, one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, okay? Again, the 1-2 punch of Cam Coleman and Ryan Wingo is one of the best you'll see in the country. If not, it is the best. Let's be real, okay? It is the best wide receiver duo in the country. You're not going to get anything better than that. That is going to put Arch Manning in a position to succeed. If the offensive line doesn't, then Cam Coleman and Ryan Wingo will, and that is huge for the development of Arch Manning. Now, my number 6 quarterback is another transfer, Darian Mensah. Going from Duke to Miami. Again, he could be a little bit higher, but I just want to see it at a higher level. Of course, he's going to be playing in the ACC again, and he will have more receiver talent around him. They have Cooper Barkay coming from Duke, going to Miami, and then, of course, you pair that with Malachi Toney, the best true freshman in the country last year. Both guys over 1,000 yards. Both guys super productive last season in 2025. They're both going to be at Miami for Darian Mensah to throw to, and they're going to do a really good job. Lots of momentum building within the program, okay? Again, Miami coming off a national championship game appearance. They're doing an amazing job there in Miami, Florida. They have done a great job developing players, getting the right guys in there, not just getting, the big names, spending a bunch of money, but getting the right guys in there, spending money on the correct players, and not just getting players with big names or high price tags, right? So Darian Mensah, they bring him in, and I think he's going to be really good. He had 3,973 yards, almost 4,000 yards, 34 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions, one of the best touchdown to interception ratio in the country. He's done a really good job there at Duke. Again, he brought them to the ACC championship. The regular season was a little bit rough, but they won the ACC championship. A huge accomplishment there at Duke. Not many people have done that at Duke. So, huge props to Darian Mensah and Cooper Barkay for getting that team to the ACC championship and winning that football game, no matter how they got there, right? You can talk about the rules and everything and the tiebreaker stuff. Throw that out the window. They won the ACC championship, and that is a huge accomplishment there at Duke. And now he's just bringing that experience to Miami, a team that's already made it to the national championship game. And Miami basketball is only down by 1, 20-21 right now against Purdue. Looking for a huge upset. We'll see if it happens, okay? Now we get into my top 5 quarterbacks, okay? This one might be a little off the radar. Josh Hoover, the transfer from TCU going to Indiana, the Fernando Mendoza replacement. He had 3,472 yards last year at TCU, 29 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. The interceptions need to come down. If they want to go back to the national championship, the interceptions have to come down if you're Josh Hoover. But I'm banking on that happening because he was one of the best quarterbacks in the country last year. Again, I just read off his stats. He was amazing there at TCU. And I think what's most important for Josh Hoover going to Indiana, the number 1 quarterback that ran RPOs last year was Fernando Mendoza at Indiana. The number 2 quarterback that ran RPOs last year was Josh Hoover, okay? He's going to fit perfectly in that Curt Cignetti offense. He's doing a great job. Curt Cignetti has an amazing offensive system there, and Josh Hoover already fits perfectly into that. I think that's why you didn't see much drama with Indiana and which quarterback they went after, right? There was Sam Levitt out there. There was Byron Brown out there. Of course, he was probably going to go to Auburn no matter what, following Alex Golesh there. But there were a lot of high-end quarterback talent that they weren't in on. They didn't really go after. You didn't hear many rumors about Indiana going after any of these big-name quarterbacks. They saw Josh Hoover, boom. Josh Hoover's our guy. And I think it's because of that RPO rate. The number 2 quarterback in RPOs last year, he did an amazing job, and he's just going to fit that Curt Cignetti system to a T. Now, moving up to number 4, I'm pretty sure he's going to play. The NCAA is challenging his ruling, but Trinidad Chambliss is my number 4 quarterback in the country. Okay, you saw his potential against Georgia. Run around 50 yards, just running in the backfield and everything, making insane plays. He's that guy. He reminds me a lot of Kyler Murray. I think he plays a lot like Kyler Murray. He's kind of smaller, but he just moves around so well. He's able to take off with his legs. He's not even really a scrambler, Lamar Jackson. That's who I would call a scrambling quarterback, right? Trinidad Chambliss is more of a Patrick Mahomes type player. Look, he's not as good as Patrick Mahomes, and I'm not ever going to say that. He's probably not even as good as Kyler Murray. But Kyler Murray and Patrick Mahomes play in very similar ways in which they run around in the backfield, but they always have their eyes down the field looking to throw the football, right? Lamar Jackson kind of runs around, and then he looks to run the ball, right? Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, and Trinidad Chambliss now, they like to move around in the backfield, but they always have their eyes downfield, always looking to make the right play and make the right throw. Now, Trinidad Chambliss has a really good season to build off of. Like I just said, he had a great game against Georgia. They played really well in the college football playoffs. Now, he has a really good baseline to build off of. 3,937 yards, almost 4K yards, 22 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. The touchdowns could come up, but again, a ton of yards, just a ton of production there at the quarterback position. He can turn anything into something at any moment, like we saw against Georgia. He can do almost anything. He can make almost every play on a football field. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, returning in 2026 for a reason, okay? And again, he just shows up in the biggest moments. One of the most important factors of being a quarterback is being able to have that clutch factor, being able to show up in the biggest moments, making your best plays in the biggest moments. You watch Trey Donaldson, the Miami point guard. He was at Michigan last year. He just beat Missouri. A lot of people, I don't know if you guys saw this game, but he showed up every single time. He did this at Michigan. I watched it every single game. He showed up in the biggest moments and made the biggest plays in the biggest moments. I was texting with one of my friends. He plays the best basketball in the last 4 minutes of the game. He might struggle a little bit throughout the game, but if it's close at the end, you can count on Trey Donaldson to make a play. He did the same thing at Michigan. He won the Big Ten tournament with a play at the end of the game. I think that was either the semifinals or the championship. Not sure. It was a long time ago. I don't remember. But makes huge plays in the biggest moments. He's a point guard, right, for the Miami Hurricanes. That's what Trinidad Chambliss needs to do. The quarterback is the point guard of the offense. He needs to go out there and make the biggest plays in the biggest moments in the biggest football games, and he's done that, and he's going to continue to do that in 2026. Now, my number 3 quarterback is going to be Julian Saint, the quarterback there at Ohio State, going into his second year at Ohio State. He had a great year last year, 3,610 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He is the most accurate quarterback in the country. I believe around a 80% completion percentage last year. He was absurd whenever it comes to completion percentage. Of course, it helps to have Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Carnell Tate is leaving, so that gives me a little bit of pause here, and I think that's why I have him down at number 3 instead of higher than that. But Julian Saint, he's one of the best young quarterbacks in the country because, again, he's so accurate. But his most underrated part of the game is his arm talent, man. Everyone talks about his accuracy. No one talks about his arm. I watched it live. I was at the Michigan-Ohio State game. We've talked about it before. He made a throw to Carnell Tate that was deep down the field. And I'm like, why is and he made it look effortless. He made it look like he didn't even try. And I'm like, why has nobody talked about this? Why has nobody talked about how good of an arm that Julian Saint has? And I think it's just because the completion percentage and the wide receivers around him really took away from that, and people were focused on other things. But he has the arm talent to compete with anybody, man. You can't just talk about his accuracy. You have to be able to point out how good of a thrower of the football, and not just how good of a thrower, but how good of a passer, because there's a difference. You go on Joel Klatt's show, he talks a lot about the difference between a thrower of the football and a passer of the football. Anthony Richardson, that is a thrower of the football. He can throw it a mile, but can he layer the ball? Can he get the ball to his receivers? Bryce Underwood had this issue last year at Michigan. He liked to put a zip on it. He was firing the ball in there every single time. He's a really good thrower of the football. He's not good at passing it to his teammates. Julian Sayin is insanely good at layering the ball and getting it where it needs to be, putting it in the perfect position where only his wide receiver can get it. Of course, it does help with Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. They can get the balls that almost no other receiver can, but man, you cannot say enough about how good of a season that Julian Sayin had last year, right? He also happens to have, the best wide receiver coming back in college football next year. Jeremiah Smith, you can't say enough about how good of a wide receiver he is. He is the best wide receiver in college that I think I've ever seen. Marvin Harrison was good. And then you lose Marvin Harrison, and then you come back with someone who's even better, right? Jeremiah Smith is probably the best wide receiver in college football that I've seen personally. I know there's people, go back in the past, you see a lot of really good wide receivers, but in my lifetime, I think Jeremiah Smith takes it. I know Devontae Smith, he won the Heisman, right? He's up there, but man, Jeremiah Smith, he's just he's a different animal. He's one of the best wide receivers I have ever seen in my life, and of course, that is going to greatly help Julian Sayin in 2026. Now, number 2 is a little bit of a surprise. Okay, CJ Carr is my number 2 quarterback in the country. I know about a month ago, I'm not sure if he still is, but he was the Heisman favorite on FanDuel's odds, so I truly believe in that. He had 2,741 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions last year. Didn't turn the ball over a lot, was really good at handing off the ball to Jeremiah Love. Okay, he was the best running back in the country. He's leaving. Now they're going to need CJ Carr to come through in big moments because they don't have that superstar at the running back position anymore. And I think he's going to be able to do that because they got a ton of wide receiver talent. Okay, Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter, 2 former 5-stars from Ohio State, developed under that Brian Hartline system, left Ohio State, going to Notre Dame, both of them going to Notre Dame. That is 2 huge gets for that Notre Dame offense that is going to become a lot less reliant on the run game for that offense, right? You lose Jeremiah Love, you lose Jadarian Price, 2 really good running backs that are going to be drafted in the upcoming 2026 draft. They're not going to be relying on that. You just can't. You're not going to have running backs as good as that. You're not going to have a duo as good as that next year. So you're going to have to be able to throw the ball a lot better. And I think CJ Carr, he has the talent. He's a former 5-star. And then you throw in 2 5-star wide receivers. And I think that is a great recipe for success for this Notre Dame team. I think that's why you see them at the top of the odds boards for the 2026 National Championship. And then my number 1 quarterback for the 2026 season is going to be Dante Moore, okay? He was projected to be the number 2 overall pick going into the 2026 NFL draft. So if the only guy better than him was Fernando Mendoza and he's leaving, how could you not put Dante Moore at number 1 in the quarterback rankings for 2026? 3,565 yards last year, 30 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. The interceptions could come down a little bit. The touchdowns could go up a little bit. They're not great there. They are really, really, really solid, though, and I believe a lot in what Oregon is doing there, okay? They have Decorian Moore and Evan Stewart's coming back. Evan Stewart was super productive 2 years ago. Whenever they went 12-0 in the regular season, lost to Ohio State in the college football playoffs, got crushed. Evan Stewart was insanely productive that year. Tears his ACL, misses all of last season. There were thoughts he could come back at the end of the year, ended up not coming to fruition, but Evan Stewart will be back in 2026 for the Oregon Ducks, and I think that is going to play a huge part in Dante Moore's success next year. And then, of course, Decorian Moore, the true freshman last year, had a huge season. He's only going to build off of that. A super talented young kid. He is going to be insanely good for that Oregon Ducks offense. And then you throw in a guy like Andrew Olesh. Look, you lose Kenyon Sadiq. He's one of the best tight ends that we've seen in a long time. He reminds me a lot of Kyle Pitts, super athletic. He's insanely good. You lose him. But you bring in a guy like Andrew Olesh, who is a highly rated top 100 recruit from Penn State. He was a tight end there. He spent 1 season there, and then he transferred after the James Franklin fiasco, goes to Oregon. And he's not going to be as good as Kenyon Sadiq. You're not going to find a player that's as good as Kenyon Sadiq. But he has a very similar game as Kenyon Sadiq. So I think he's going to fit into that system insanely well. And I think he's just going to help Decorian Moore continue to be the number 1 quarterback in the country and hopefully finally win Oregon that national championship. Now, last but not least, as you know, throughout the offseason, every single episode, we've taken a spotlight and put it on a college football program. And today, one of the most interesting programs, and one that I've been really looking forward to, the Virginia Tech Hokies, are going to be under the spotlight today, okay? In the past, they won 7-6 in 2023. They won the Military Bowl. And then they were going into that season, that 2024 season, with a ton of momentum. You know, Kyron Jones is coming in. Brent Pry was doing a really good job. A lot of belief within that program. And then it just kind of falls flat. You know, they had that game against Clemson in 2024 that they were going into. And I was praying, man. I was praying that they were going to be good. Because I wanted to see Enter Sandman, two highly ranked teams, Virginia Tech, Clemson, in 2024. And I was really hoping that those two teams would be really good. And then Virginia Tech falls flat on their face. I was really high on Virginia Tech going into that season, and then they just fall flat on their face. They go 6-7 that year, ended up losing their bowl game, so they went 6-6, lost their bowl game. Extremely disappointing year. And then, you know, Brent Pry is kind of like, oh, okay, is this the right guy? And then they go 3-9 in 2025 and fired Brent Pry. Not a great start to the season, but in the middle of the season, they hired James Franklin, okay? Easily one of the best hires in the country this year, okay? James Franklin, he is well known for going 10-2. But if you go 10-2 at Virginia Tech, that is a huge win. That's going to put you in the top 3 or 4 teams in the ACC, and that is how you compete for ACC championships, and in return, compete for college football playoff spots. And then if you're getting in the college football playoff, at least you're giving yourself a chance to be in the national championships. Just a huge opportunity here for Virginia Tech. I think that hiring James Franklin is a huge hire and absolutely the correct hire. He's a really good coach, won a ton of games at Penn State, one of the highest ranked coaches in wins at Penn State, which is a historically really good program, right? So he's done a really good job at Penn State. He did a really good job at Vanderbilt. Before that, that's what got him the Penn State job. I love what James Franklin does. I'm one of his biggest believers. You know, just because you haven't doesn't mean you can't, right? Maybe he is one of the guys that can't. You know, we saw that last year. And, you know, Penn State, you can argue whether it was the right decision or not to fire James Franklin, but man, whenever you don't win with that kind of team, whenever you lose to Oregon, but not only do you lose to Oregon, you lose to UCLA, you lose to Northwestern, that's whenever you notice that something is broken within that program and something had to change, right? Something had to change. So you can't get too mad at Penn State for making the move that they made. But not only did they bring in James Franklin, but they also have the number 6 transfer portal class according to On3. They did a really good job. They got a lot of guys from Penn State. They got a lot of guys from some really good programs. And the headliner, in my opinion, is Ethan Grunkemeyer. Okay, 1,339 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Doesn't sound great. He didn't play the first half of the season. You know, that was Drew Aller's spot. He ends up getting hurt, and then he comes in. Super talented young freshman, and I think he is going to fit James Franklin's system perfectly at Virginia Tech. A huge get for that Virginia Tech offense that's just looking to lay a foundation to build off of going forward. And I think that Ethan Grunkemeyer is going to be able to do that. A very highly talented quarterback, one that you haven't seen at Virginia Tech in a very long time. Now, they could be one of the best teams in the ACC next year, but I don't see it happening with the schedule that they have. The 3 biggest games that they have home versus Georgia Tech on October 17th, and then a week later they have to travel to Death Valley to play Clemson. Who knows how good Clemson's going to be? You know, Clemson's been a little rough the past few years, so we'll see if that's really a big game. Then they have to go to Miami on November 20th. You can pretty much count that as a loss, I'd assume. But they also have to play SMU and Virginia, so really, if you're thinking about the past few years in the ACC, the top teams in the ACC, Virginia played in the ACC Championship, SMU played in the ACC Championship, Miami played in the National Championship, Clemson won the ACC 2 years ago, Georgia Tech just got Justice Haynes from Michigan, one of the best running backs in the country, okay? That is going to be a very, very tough schedule for them next year. So, like I said with Ethan Grunkemeyer, they're just looking to build that foundation. If you make a bowl game at Virginia Tech, I think that's a huge win. Anything more than that is just cake, right? There's a lot of things that could go wrong next year, but 6-6, 7-5, 8-4 even, that would be a really good season for Virginia Tech, and that is something that they can build off of going forward, and I think that they will be able to, especially with that transfer portal class helping turn them around. Now, going forward in the future past 2026, okay, they have the 29th ranked recruiting class last year, which isn't terrible. They had 7 4-stars, headlined by Davion Brown, the 6'1", top 300 wide receiver from Richmond, Virginia. He was a really highly ranked recruit. He's going to come in and hopefully turn around the wide receiver room because they just need athletes. They need guys in there that can go do things that most people can't, because that's what they haven't had at Virginia Tech in a really long time. But the key to them building in the future is going to be building out of Virginia. They need to recruit Virginia a lot better. 10 4-stars in the 2026 class were out of Virginia last year. 8 of them signed elsewhere. The 2 that signed with Virginia Tech were the 9th and 10th ranked. So the top 8 players in Virginia ended up going to a different school. That's unacceptable. That is not okay. You have to be able to land the top players in Virginia out of high school, because those are going to be your base guys. Those are going to be the guys that fight and bleed and die for that logo. Those are the guys that are going to be the base of your team. If you can't recruit Virginia at a high clip, it's not going to go well at Virginia Tech. You know, you saw a lot of that issue. There's a lot of, like the DMV, Maryland, Maryland, Virginia. You have to be able to recruit that area because there are so many highly ranked recruits. Numerous 5-stars. Savion Hyder's going to Michigan. I know we talk about Michigan a lot on the show, but Savion Hyder was from Virginia, and they weren't ever in on him. That's an issue. That's an issue for Virginia Tech. You have to be able to fund the football program enough to get highly ranked recruits like that, especially, and at least have a shot whenever you're recruiting within the state of Virginia, because those are the guys that you're going to build your team around. Now, I think that they are going to be able to fund that program at a much higher level than they have in the past few years, because I think they see the writing on the wall. I think eventually, and I don't know if it'll happen soon, but I think eventually down the road, 2030, 2040, I think eventually you're going to see a split from the NCAA. I just think it's inevitable. I don't think the NCAA does a good job, so I think you're going to see a split. Would Virginia Tech get left out of that? I think a lot of people at Virginia Tech are seeing that writing on the wall and saying, oh, we need to go win football games right now. Right now. Because they might get left out of that eventual separation from the NCAA, and they don't want to be left behind. They don't want to end up in the position that Oregon State and Washington State were just put in by the Pac-12. You don't want to be that team. They are going to fund that program because they know that they are a historically rich football program. They have tons of tradition there. They have no reason not to be a part of an eventual separation from the NCAA, and they're going to fight like hell to get back to what they were in the 1990s, the early 2000s. They're going to fight like hell to get back to that position where they're competing for national championships, competing for the ACC championship, and winning football games, and winning a lot of football games. And I think James Franklin is going to be the perfect guy to do that for Virginia Tech. That is going to do it for our show. Again, I cannot thank you guys enough for watching it. It really means a ton to me whenever I see people watching the show, even if it's just like 20 people. It just means so much to me. And if you're here still all the way through the show and you haven't subscribed, what are you doing? Go down, hit the subscribe button. You clearly like the show, so go down, hit the subscribe button so you see more of my content going forward. Again, we will upload every single week. I know we missed last week. Had a nice vacation with the girlfriend. Got to go to Colorado with snowboarding. I wasn't very good at it. She was a lot better at it than me, but that's okay. We still had a ton of fun. Our snowboard instructor, because we had no idea what we were doing, so our snowboard instructor was the coolest guy. His name was Free, and I absolutely love that. His first name was Free, and I think that's awesome. He didn't have teeth, heavy West Coast accent, super chill dude. Like, you go to Colorado and you imagine a snowboarder. He's got long dreads, braided beard, that kind of thing. Absolutely loved it. One of the most fun experiences I've had in a really long time. Super fun vacation, super fun spring break. But now we're back to the grind, back to talking college football every single week. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week.